BoxingVoice.com. We are here with one of the most important voices in boxing, Mr. Max Kellerman. First off, Max, what do you think of Edwin Rodriguez's performance tonight?
Well, first I'll tell you what I think of you guys, man. You guys get a lot of good interviews. I stay up on some interviews linking through Twitter to you guys, for sure.
We got a good one right now here with
you.
you.
There you go. So Edwin Rodriguez, he's a good overall super middleweight. He's very big for the division. He rehydrated 20 pounds between the official weigh-in and this morning. He's a good puncher, not a devastating puncher. He's a good boxer. I wouldn't say he's a great boxer. He has good speed. I wouldn't say, he's just good in a lot of areas. And I think he fits in. I think now he probably fits in. He's ready to test the elite, or at least the names of the 168-pound division, provided the name is not Andre Ward. I mean, no one's really messing with Andre Ward at 68, but I'd like to see him in against just about anyone else.
How do you see him faring against the two guys he said today, Jean Pascal and Kelly Pavlik, in the 168-pound division?
At this point, good luck getting a fight with Pavlik. He's entering his prime. Rodriguez is, as I mentioned, he's big for the division. He sets a good pace, et cetera, et cetera. He's just sound in a lot of areas. Pascal, I could see a fight like that happening.
Yeah, because he said he rehydrated 22 pounds, so
Exactly.
I think a jump might make sense.
Exactly. If there's a money fight at 75, plus you got to figure Andre Ward's, once he's there, that's where the money's going to be. But and without Andre Ward, 68 gets a lot more interesting because it's a good division, but you have such a dominant fighter on the top that, what's the point? None of these guys are going to beat him. So once he goes to 75, 68 opens up, and I think Edwin Rodriguez fits in nicely there or at 75.
Sort of like the heavyweight division with Andre Ward right now. Without the Klitschko's, everything gets interesting. Without Ward, everything gets interesting.
The difference is the heavyweight division without the Klitschko's is still not interesting. The super middleweights are interesting. They got some good fighters.
Now, we saw an up-and-coming guy in Louis Devalia lose to Darchinyan.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to? You think Devalia maybe just underestimated Vic and didn't think Vic would be this awkward?
No, not underestimated. I think he knew what he was getting into. Just experience. Look, this goes back, if you go back almost 100 years, Gene Tunney, who wound up the heavyweight champion of the world, fought Harry Greb, who was already a great fighter. And Greb, there's no footage of Greb, so this is all newspaper accounts, but Greb gave him the business. Thumbs, elbows, head, shoulders, everything, not to mention his fists. And he really just mugged him, beat the hell out of him, but Tunney finished the fight on his feet. And then Tunney won some rematches against Greb and wound up going on to be heavyweight champ. The danger of a fight like this, if I were in Devalia's corner, I probably would have stopped it around the 8th round, is that you don't want a fight like this to ruin a young up-and-coming fighter. And I really did feel like Devalia was taking a real beating in there. But that's something you got to negotiate while it's going on in your own mind. Do you stop the fight, keep the kid from being ruined in a fight like this, or do you let him finish on his feet, hoping he'll have some moments late? He'll be able to go the distance, learn from that, grow from it, and maybe they made the right decision, and I would have made the wrong one because he did finish the fight on his feet. He had some big moments late in the 9th round. And if a fight like this doesn't ruin a guy, and usually with a deep amateur background, and Devalia has a deep amateur background, there's something to fall back on, then a guy can grow from a fight like this. And boxing history has as many examples of kids going on to learn from a fight against a wily veteran like Darchinyan, to learn from that, to build on it, to go on to do good things. There's many examples of that as there are examples of a fight like this, being too much for a young kid and ruining him. In Devalia's case, I expect that we'll see him again on a top level. Darchinyan's still good, man. He barely loses to Morris and to top fighters at 122. At 118. So I wouldn't sweat too hard the fact that Devalia gets beaten up by Darchinyan tonight.
Now, do you think Darchinyan makes noise at 122, being that he's pretty much lost to the top guys that are already at 122 at lower weight divisions?
Yeah, no, but look at the losses. The only bad loss is to Donaire. I think Darchinyan gives everyone all they can handle. He's always been a better fighter, I think, than given credit for. One of the reasons that I have Donaire so high on my pound-for-pound list, and I've had him really high for a number of years now, is the knockout of Darchinyan. Darchinyan was not only blitzing real good fighters at the time, he wasn't really losing that many rounds. He was dominating good fighters and knocking them out, even if it was ugly or it wasn't fundamentally sound or classical boxing, he was still dominating. And when Donaire knocked him out like that, oh my God, Donaire is ridiculous. But Darchinyan, since then, if you look at the names on his resume and the way he's lost to them in close competitive fights, I think he's still got plenty left.
Well, now that you mentioned Donaire, I mean, that October 13 card is looming, and I think every fight fan is salivating and counting down the days to see Donaire Nishioka, and then especially Rios Alvarado on the undercard. How do you see those two fights playing out?
Nishioka's a really good fighter. He's one of my favorite YouTube fighters, you know. Southpaw, busy, can handle himself, you know, aggressive, hasn't lost in forever. When he did lose, it was kind, you know, it was the way Marquez loses to Pacquiao, kind of could go either way fights to another borderline great fighter. He's a tremendous fighter, but he's 36 years old. And Donaire is a special talent. You know, I think he's a next-level talent. So I expect Donaire to win a good fight. You know, Donaire's fighting guys like Matabula and Nishioka, and why isn't he knocking everyone out, you know, because when you fight, as Darchinyan has recently, one top fighter after another, it's tough enough to win all those fights, you know, against tough fighters who are still on top, let alone to knock them all out. But Donaire might knock Nishioka out. I think Donaire is that good. And then Rios Alvarado. Rios Alvarado is the best action fight that can be made in boxing. You know, Alvarado technically is not as good as Rios. It should be the kind of fight where Rios knocks him out in a couple rounds, but Alvarado has some extra dimension to him, some next level will to win, which is why when Prescott looks like he's about to, you know, take his head off, Alvarado not only rallies back, but rallies back to win. And he's been in a bunch of fights like that. And Rios is the same way. So I expect, I think that's the fight of the year. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. Maybe the fight of the last couple years. And if I could make one action fight in boxing, that's the action fight I'd make. And they made it, and I can't wait to see it.
Now, backtracking a little bit.
And by the way, if you're a fight fan, that's a relatively cheap ticket considering the quality of that card, especially Rios Alvarado for the action. Disneyland is right there if you have kids. Man, you might be able to go all in $1,500 round trip from the East Coast if you're an East Coast fight fan and get out to Carson, California, take the kids to Disneyland. I mean, this is a great event, not only to watch on HBO, but if you can be there live, I'd be there live because I really think it's the kind of card you're going to tell your grandkids you attended if you go.
Now, just like I said, I was backtracking a little bit. Your call in the 12th round of Chavez Martinez was epic. I have to say, one of the best calls in boxing I've heard in a long time. Do you think that 12th round warrants a rematch between Chavez and Martinez?
Yes, I absolutely do. And I understand what people are saying when they're like, oh, but Martinez just beat him up for 12 rounds and for 11 rounds, and just because Chavez has that great 12th, just because he has the great 12th round, you mean the 12th round where he almost knocked Martinez out? Because you all saw it. I was ringside. I saw the look on Martinez's face. He was shocked. My thought was, oh, my God, he's not going to make it out of this round because he's staying and fighting with Chavez, and Chavez kept hurting him. I mean, most of us, I think, felt Martinez about to get knocked out. Let's not forget what you were thinking at the time you were watching that. And for everyone's like, yeah, but, well, that was only because Martinez was tired. Well, yeah, he was tired because Chavez was, whatever you want to say, Chavez kept pressuring him, steadily pressuring him the whole fight. Martinez had to keep moving, had to keep a very busy pace. Oh, it's only because Martinez broke his hand. Who did he break his hand on? The ref? No, it's hard-headed Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Well, Chavez started so late, it was a bad fight. And he should have started punching earlier. What do you mean punching earlier? Martinez kept his right foot outside of Chavez's left foot, was a step ahead of him the whole fight. The more you punch, the worse beating you take when you're not in a position to throw punches. Instead of taking credit away from both guys, give credit to both guys, because I think it was that kind of fight. And now, heading into the rematch, both guys know one thing. Chavez can hurt Martinez, and it doesn't look like Martinez can hurt Chavez. And how is that going to play out psychologically in the rematch? I'd love to see a rematch of that fight.
Now, should Chavez get suspended and Martinez is looking for an opponent, the name everyone's being mentioned is Triple G. But it seems like Martinez's people aren't going there. What do you think about a Triple G and Maravilla fight down the road?
No one's going near Golovkin. Yo, Golovkin is I said it during the Golovkin fight. There is a monster loose in the middleweight division. I think all the fighters at middleweight are going to want these good European fighters to try and play traffic cop for Martinez or Chavez or whoever's the money guy. They're going to put Pirog in with him. Pirog's a good fighter. That's a good fight. I think Golovkin probably wins. Macklin, whoever they can send to play traffic cop for Golovkin. But let me tell you something. Golovkin's coming. I mean, that guy is... I'm usually partial to the boxers. I like guys who play defense. Golovkin's easy to hit. He does not move his head. He gets hit cleanly. But there is something next level about that guy. As an amateur, it was the case. As a pro, it's the case. And I think the better the opponent, the better Golovkin fights. And I'm looking forward to watching Golovkin fight a whole lot. The question is, who's going to have the guts to get in with him?
It seems like not many. But it was announced on the airwaves.
There's actually one guy who I think would be favored to beat Golovkin, 68 and below, and that might be the one guy Golovkin's people don't want to fight because, you know, he's too good. That's Andre Ward. You know, other than Andre Ward, who'd you pick as a favorite over Golovkin?
I mean, I can't see it. He doesn't agree with me, but we'll talk to him later about that. Tonight it was announced that Adrien Broner and Antonio DeMarco, it's pretty much a done deal on HBO. Obviously, Broner is being groomed as maybe the next Mayweather, maybe the next pound-for-pound star. This is, to me, a legit fight for Broner at 135. What do you think of this fight, and how do you see it playing out? And where does it put Broner if he makes a stamp and knocks out DeMarco?
Broner is a beast. I mean, I know he struggled against Ponce de Leon, and I know, and he's been fighting a little smaller, softer competition since then, and he didn't make the weight. All those things are true, but you know it when you see it. And with Broner, it's so obvious. Now, two things about him. One, his just because he has the Mayweather defense, no one plays that defense like Mayweather. Broner is a very good defensive fighter. He's not quite as good, I think, as maybe he thinks he is defensively. Broner's also maybe even a better puncher than he realizes, or at least you know, if you had to gauge things, I'd say excellent fighter all around, but maybe not quite as good defensively as is perceived, and even a better puncher is perceived. He's a real puncher and a real good boxer, and he's the truth. But the fact is, he did struggle the last time he was against an aggressive, crafty kind of fighter in Ponce, and DeMarco's a bigger, stronger version of that. He's in his prime. He has that thing inside him where he never stops coming. That's a really tough, interesting fight. If Broner dominates DeMarco, that is a real statement, and I think you'll see him start popping up in the top 10 of various pound-for-pound lists.
And my last question before I let you go.
Where I think we all think Broner's heading, you know.
Yeah, we do. We all do. My last question before I let you go. We obviously know the one fight that we all want may never happen. But if there's one fight that Max Kellerman wants to see, what fight is that?
I mean,
besides that
it's a
one.
boring answer. You know what? Mayweather Pacquiao, everyone wants to see. I'd love to see Rios Alvarado. Oh, we get to see it on the 13th? You know, that would literally be the answer. Like a lot of people, Rigondeaux is an interesting fight for Donaire. Even if it's not an action-packed fight, that is a really interesting fight because Rigondeaux is also a kind of next-level talent. And even though maybe he hasn't beaten the same level fighters as Donaire, I'd like to see that fight. Look, if you know, it could happen if Andre Ward takes on Tavoris Cloud. Larry Merchant and I were talking for a while about that after the Ward fight. Cloud's a big, strong, young, tough kid, and it's 75 is not the same as 68, and that'd be a really interesting fight. I suppose Golovkin and Martinez is way up there for me. I'd love to see Gennady Golovkin and Sergio Martinez. Man, there are a bunch of them. You know, at junior middleweight, you could have a round robin for 2 years with guys like Alvarez and Kirkland and Bundridge and Still Angulo and Cotto. And not only are they all more or less evenly matched, but they all bring it. You know, that could be any one of those, any permutation of any one of those fighters is, you know, a great fight of the year type candidate. They're you know, it's the same as all the purists want to see. You want to see the fights that aren't worth the money to the fighters yet, Rigondeaux and Donaire. because you're wondering what would happen, and you want to see the great action fights.
And that was my last question, I lied. Any hope to the American heavyweight division with the three guys we have now, Mitchell, Jennings, and Wilder?
Here's how it's going to work with the heavyweights. If anyone's serious about the American heavyweight division, someone's got to go to one of these football programs here in Jersey, or right there in Jersey, or in Southern California, or in Texas, or in Florida, where those football factories, but not high school or college, junior high school. And you got to grab these kids as they're walking onto the football field, and you got to grab a bunch of them, and you got to see who has the temperament and the kind of personality to make it through the gym. And if you start recruiting football players at a young enough age, can't be when they're already 20 years old, when they're 12 years old. And, the ones who make it through, who are weeded out and are tough enough to survive the boxing culture, by the time they're 20, 22 years old, will have the best heavyweights in the world again. Because the fact is, the heavyweight championship of the world is still contested on network television here in America, but it's on the blind side of the quarterback. It's when the best defensive end is trying to get around the best left tackle. That's the heavyweight championship of the world. That's Frazier and Foreman. They just all play in the NFL now.
Well, there you have it, boxing fans. Mike Kellerman speaking the truth.